G'day everyone, welcome back to another video. Here's Lenny right here. Here's Lenny the dog. You never see him in the videos, but he's still alive, don't you worry. Anyways, but today we're going to be attempting another no-filter shrimp tank, but we are going to run into some problems later on in the video that it's going to compromise the tank and the shrimp. So stay tuned for that, it's an interesting one, and with that said, let's start from the beginning and I'll show you how I set up the tank. Alright, so today we're scaping a very small tank. It's actually 20 centimeters cube. 30 centimeters translates to 8 inches. So the tank holds around 8 liters or 2.5 gallons. So it's only big enough to house snails and shrimp. The light we're using is a Higa bubble light. It's really cheap, like a $10 to $20 aquarium light, dimmable, and it's got a timer built in and everything. I'll leave the link to it in the description below. That's literally the only piece of equipment we're using for this aquascape. So with that said, let's start scaping the tank. Alright, so first things first, we need to make the nutrients for the substrate. Simply put, it's like food for the aquarium plants. We're going to be using just the original fluvial stratum for this aquascape. So what we're going to do is grind up all the aquasoil and basically turn it into a powder so it stays down in the substrate so the nutrients don't leach into the water column or anything, because we are going to cap it later on. And to crush up the aquasoil, we're using mortar and pestle. Alright, moving to the tank, it's time to add the crushed aquasoil, and yeah, this is going to be basically the food for the plants. They're going to take all the nutrients, and this aquasoil usually lasts around a year. Then usually in that amount of time we redo the aquascape. The cheaper alternative is using organic potting mix that you use for gardening. That's safe for aquariums as long as you've got sand capped over it. Now just to add even more nutrients to the substrate, we're going to be adding some root tabs to the aquasoil. I love the Secum Flourish root tabs, and as you can see I've crushed them up, also using the mortar and pestle, and I just find it easier to spread around when it's all crushed up rather than in little tablets. Therefore you can reach more surface area with it. Alright, so here we're getting a credit card and just wedging it in between the soil and the glass and just pushing the soil back so that when we add the sand it looks more aesthetic and you don't see the layer of the dirt underneath the sand. It looks a little unsightly and we're trying to go for an aesthetic look in this tank. And for the decorative sand we're going to be using Colorado sand by ADA. So yeah, a bit on the more high-end side, so I don't really like to go on that side of the hobby too much. But I've been really interested in trying this sand at one point, and honestly it just looks amazing. It's worth the price. I chose it because it's more coarse, and with this tank we need more surfaces for beneficial bacteria to colonize. Because it's a no filter tank, it's really important, and it just looks so damn good. Really happy with the result of how this sand looks. And from the front to the back you can see how the level of the sand raises. This creates a really good effect whenever aquascaping, and as you can see with sticking the tweezers into the sand that we've got heaps of planting space for later on. Ooh, hardscape time. Alright, so what we're going to be doing first off is chucking a piece of black Serraeus stone. Now in this tank we're going for an island composition, which I think will look really cool, especially with the plants I've got in mind. And then continuing that line across to create that sort of border, we're going to be using some black lava rock, just 2 little pieces that I have lying around. And now we've got a solid outline for the plants and wood. And then wood wise, I found this little piece of spider wood that I had lying around that looks like a really nice tree sort of. So we're going to glue that in the center of the main rock and try and create sort of like a tree at the top of the mountain. And to help with that border we're trying to go for, I also added some gray gravel just to fill in that little gap between the rock and the glass. For the back where we're going to be planting most of the stems, we're going to be adding a lot of this gravel just to pile up and get some height. Therefore we don't need like really large plants to fill up the back of the tank. So we're just going to pile it up in the back here. That's kind of why we created that border too, another reason, just so we don't get that gravel spilling in the foreground. And this pile of gravel, since it's really coarse, is going to provide lots of areas for beneficial bacteria to colonize. Therefore this tank stays a lot more stable in the long term. And the last thing, hardscape wise, is just a bit more decoration. We're going to be going around the island and just creating a dramatic effect by getting a lot of that scattered gravel. What you just got to do is grab little handfuls of gravel of any kind and you just chuck it along the hardscape and let it fall naturally, and it looks really cool, creates like a river effect, and this color gravel matches the hardscape really well in this aquascape. Alright, so it's planting time, but unfortunately I was storing a bunch of plants for the scape. Spent like $120 towards these plants, but $100 of them apparently melted away in the container because I left them in there for a couple days. There wasn't enough nutrients and now they're all mushy, so we're just gonna have to work with the boost, which was what survived. That's probably the most expensive plant that I bought, so that's kind of the plus side. And here we're just stuffing it in between the little nooks and crannies of the wood, trying to create that tree effect at the top. I thought boost would be a great way to try and recreate a tree. It's kind of like a bonsai tree sort of idea, but with boost. But I'm not really a fan of those bonsai tree aquascapes, but I think this still looks pretty cool, and it's kind of got that idea of a bonsai tree. Now here we're just adding a little dab of super glue gel, and we're just going to be adding another little piece of boost just to create some more interest and to have some more green trailing down the mountain. And then we also stuck a little piece of Anubias nana petite alongside of it too. I had a little piece lying around, so I thought, why not? So we didn't have the rest of the plants at the time of recording, so we had to wait a couple days, and I thought may as well just fill it up while we're here, so let's go do that.
Oh, well, alright, now this has not gone the way I expected it to. So if you can't see in the aquarium right now, well, we got a couple dead shrimp. That's not a good thing. There's a bit more story behind it. The plants are doing great, but everything else, well, let's take a closer look, shall we? Well, here's the aquarium right here. As you can see, it's not looking great. If we look in, there's this really weird fungus growing throughout the water. Here are the dead shrimp. Really sad to see. They're not the first ones to die in this tank. So we actually did have like 3 die the first week of getting the shrimp. So after we got the shrimp, I also added some beneficial bacteria from another aquarium, just getting the filter sponge and squeezing that into the water column. Therefore, that's why the substrate is looking a lot more brown. It's basically all that gunk that's settled in. I don't mind the look of the sand, it's actually kind of cool, but for some reason the shrimp are dying. We've only got one shrimp left. That's a real shame, because I also got given these by an online store from the manager. Yeah, unfortunately they just haven't made it. Well, the tank should be cycled by now, because we have been adding quick start, this stuff right here. And that should be enough, honestly, for a small tank like this with a couple shrimp, but it's not. And we also did the filter media method, and we're still getting lots of deaths. So, alright, so I did a bit of research on what this clouding could be, and it's actually a white fungus. So it came from the driftwood that I added just a tiny little bit, and I didn't take that out quick enough, and it tends to then quickly spread across the aquarium. But the only way to remove this is to really just do water changes, and over time it should disappear. Now, the shrimp deaths only come down to two possibilities: either poor water quality, so we're going to do a test on the water parameters, see if there's any nasties in the water, and if that's all clear, then it's probably down to just the shrimp themselves. They just came in too stressed through the shipping, and sometimes they just tend to die on you because they're very sensitive, especially Bloody Mary shrimp. So what we're going to do now is grab the test kit, check out what's going on in this aquarium. Alright, so I've done the test, and here's the results. So surprisingly, everything is in shape. Well, not everything, but basically we got no ammonia. If we look next door, the nitrite, there's absolutely none, and the nitrate is what I'm worried about. There's barely any nitrate, probably like 0.5 parts per million or something, but yeah, that's not a good thing. That could mean two things: either the tank just hasn't even started cycling yet, which can't be right because we've added so much beneficial bacteria and I did ghost feeding and all that sort of stuff, or maybe there just hasn't been enough food for the shrimp. I put a bit of Bacteria, which is a shrimp food, in, but not much, so it could have been that maybe. But I think what the plan is now is we're going to do a water change around 30 to 40%. We just got one shrimp left in here. We need to get rid of these shrimp too, and clearly they haven't been, for some reason the ammonia hasn't even gone up a little bit because of those dead shrimp, but yeah, they've only been in here for like 9 or 10 hours dead. So we're going to do that now, and when we fill up the tank it should look really nice and clear again. Then you can take a closer look at how the plants are growing. Alright, so the water change is over, and now we can take a closer look at how the plants are all growing and everything. But yeah, as you can see, we've still got some fungus growing throughout the bottom there. That'll then start growing upwards and then start like taking up the room in the aquarium water, which is kind of annoying, but yeah, just a lot of water changes will do the trick. Now the plants are all doing pretty well. You can see that just uprooted now, which is annoying. I'll plant that in later. But as you can see, we got a bit of melting at the back here. The plants are just trying to adjust to the new habitat, going from their immersed state to their submerged state. So yeah, it's going to take a bit of waiting, and I decided we're going to add shrimp in here later on when all the plants are grown in and it looks really nice, kind of like what I did with the drink dispenser here. I let this tank sit for like a month and let the plants grow in, and then I added the shrimp. Therefore, when I added the shrimp, that all the ammonia and the nasties that the shrimp created, well, the plants just handled it straight away. So yeah, it already found its balance, and we need that before we add Bloody Mary shrimp, because Bloody Mary shrimp especially are very sensitive compared to a lot of other shrimp out there. And just to fix with the water quality, and it might help with the fungus, we're going to add a little filter. I don't think we should do a no filter tank on this one, at least for the first like couple months. That was the main intention, but I just don't see why I can't add a filter to the tank. It'll just make it run a lot smoother. I'll have a lot less issues. Yeah, a little hang on back should do the job. So what I learned from making this aquarium is to just be a bit more patient next time. I'm usually really good with like balancing the tanks and everything. It's just that this tank, I kind of rushed into it and it didn't end up very well. You will see updates on this tank in future uploads, so stay tuned if you're interested. But yeah, I kind of slacked off with this aquascape and it cost the lives of the shrimp, which I feel really bad about. But hopefully the next shrimp we get later on in like a month or so, which we'll make a whole video about, by the way, so stay tuned, hopefully won't die. So let's just try to get the plants growing in and settled in and everything, and then we can think about adding shrimp. But there's no rush. Have an awesome day, everyone. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. See ya.